the summer of 1997, I shaved my head for the first time. I did it for two reasons, and if I'm being honest, the main one was research. See, at the ripe old age of 21, my hairline had begun to recede. No surprise there, as most of the men in my family went bald in their 20s. But lucky for me, the shaved head look was in. And if I was going to use that as my fallback position, I needed to see what my skull actually looked like. But the summer of '97 was also my first summer in Chicago with its oppressive humidity, that swampy heat that makes you feel like you're walking through soup. When your best nights are the ones spent reclined on your couch, watching The Simpsons and trying to balance a sweaty bottle of Corona on your belly. Not that I ever actually did that, but I did. So I liberated my scalp from the oppressive red mop and was immediately rewarded with a tingly, cool breeze, like a brace of rubbing alcohol to the skin. It was like every pore on my head had finally realized its true purpose and potential, awakened to the glory of full-time ventilation. I waited tables that summer at a tapas restaurant. Tapas, not topless. It was Spanish food, not titties and beer. My best friend Jake had worked there during the school and got me the gig, and it was one of the best summer jobs I've ever had. The cooks, the busboys, the servers, we were like one big family. If your family is an incestuous mix of college students and young Latin American immigrants. Many of my friends at work were Mexican, with the exception of Carlos, who would always remind you that he was in fact Guatemalan. So one night, they invited Jake and I out to a bar called La Estrella for salsa and merengue night. Jake and I were both music geeks who knew little or nothing about either salsa or merengue, and so we were psyched to expand our musical horizons. Also, we were 21, we had some disposable income, and they said there'd be hot girls there. So we were pretty much in. La Estrella turned out to be this shitty little bar just inside the northernmost edge of Chicago's city limits. But the place was packed, the music was loud, and I upgraded my Corona to a Negro Modelo because I was living large. But about an hour later, we had to go. Another coworker was throwing a house party in Wicker Park that we had all promised to attend, and it was already past midnight. So Jake and I made our way to my SUV in the small adjacent parking lot, where I noticed he was still drinking from his bottle of Guinness, which he had palmed on the way out of the club. He had ordered the beer right before we had decided to jet. And as a hard-working college student who had just spent the evening serving gambas al ajillo and pincho de pollo to a bunch of high schoolers who were visiting Northwestern with their families, he'd be damned if he was going to give it up. There was an argument about bringing an open container in the car, which I lost somehow. He promised if we got pulled over, he'd take the blame, which, by the way, is not how an open container law works. But I was young, and I was stupid, and I figured, what's the chance of us getting pulled over? Meanwhile, Gerardo, one of our fellow servers, and the three busboys who he'd driven down got into his car, which was parked on the street just outside the lot. We pulled out and stopped next to them on their driver's side. Jake hung out the passenger window, shouting with Gerardo about how to get where we were going. This was pre-Google Maps, pre-smartphones even. It's that old of a story. So directions were important. I'm that old of a storyteller. That's when I noticed the police car coming down the street towards us. The bar was on the edge of a residential neighborhood, the surrounding streets quiet and peaceful, and there I was, stopped in the middle of the road, an open beer bottle in my cup holder like a flaming beacon of guilt. Could they see it? Of course not. But I could feel the suspicion emanating from that black and white Ford Taurus creeping towards us. I yelled to Gerardo, "Just go, we'll follow you." So he pulled out in front of me and made an immediate left turn onto the smaller side street. I followed, my eyes twitching back and forth to the rearview mirror, waiting for the cop to pass. Only he didn't pass. And by the time he turned down the street behind us, he already had his lights on. And I turned to Jake and said, "You motherfucker." And then shit got serious. In a matter of seconds, an entire squadron of police vehicles surrounded us. There were 3 in front of Gerardo, 3 behind me, 1 in between us. I don't even know how that got there. They locked down the whole block, and the street was like a red and blue stroboscope, my own personal disco of misery. I was ordered out of the car with my hands up, which I thought was the only thing that happened on cops. 2 officers closed in on us, one hand on their holstered guns, and instructed Jake and I to reach as far across the hood of my car as we could and spread our legs as wide as they would go. Jake was feebly pleading, "The beer is mine, the beer is mine." That goddamn beer, I was going to get arrested for it. The bottle, which was in plain view, was also the excuse they needed to start searching the truck, and search they did, very thoroughly. They were looking for something, I realized, and I was actually grateful for that, because whatever they thought I had, whoever they thought I wasn't, and I still had no clue what was going on, but I was now certain it had nothing to do about me. And I doubt it was about Gerardo and the other guys either. From my vantage point, bent over the hood of my own car, I could see them getting similar treatment with similar bewildered looks on their faces. After the officers finished searching the truck, they separated and questioned us. And when they asked what I did, I said, I was a student at Northwestern, which I imagine sounded the way a spoiled rich jock would have said it in a John Hughes movie, but I was lucky enough to go there, so I did a little collegiate name dropping. A short time later, as the cop cruisers began to disperse and my heart rate finally started to settle down, one of the officers gave me an explanation. There was a murder in the neighborhood last night, she told me. A skinhead shot and killed a black guy. And I immediately replayed the events in my head, only this time from the cop's point of view. A guy with a shaved head and his whiter-than-white buddy are yelling at a car full of Mexicans. The Mexicans pull out in front of him, and the skinhead peels away to follow. I mean, you can see the mistake. This wasn't profiling. This was hunting down a legitimate suspect in a murder investigation. And that suspect looked like me. I wanted to plead, but I'm not a skinhead. I'm just bald. But I was too afraid to crack a joke at the time. I mean, I'd never been accused of being a racist before, much less one who would commit murder. Instead, I tried to make my point by stammering, but we were at Salsa Merengue night. Because clearly a racist would like neither salsa nor merengue. I don't know if that's what did the trick, but they let us go with a warning. Me and my open container, Gerardo too, apparently he was driving on a suspended license. They told us all to go straight home, and we did. Just not our home. We went to the house party and met back up and recounted the events to anyone who would listen. Now, this might sound like it's a story about how unlucky I was to have shaved my head on that particular summer and been at that particular bar on that particular night, but it's not. See, I'm really lucky. I'm lucky that the police didn't arrest me for the open container. I'm lucky that everyone kept their cool and the situation didn't escalate over angry words. And I'm lucky that it was the police who stopped us and not an angry group of the victim's friends, because you read about people every day who weren't as lucky. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong neighborhood, an imagined gun, a misunderstood gesture, the wrong words, the wrong clothes. High-tension situations that spiral out of control. So if this was the worst of it for me, I did all right. But I hate that the difference between suspect and victim, freedom and incarceration, life and death, has to boil down to luck.